You've been fighting so hard to hold on, and that is exactly why you're still suffering. Not because life is cruel, not because life is cruel, not because you weren't smart enough or worthy enough, but because somewhere along the way, you decided that holding on was the same thing as strength, that controlling the shape of your life was the same thing as living it. It isn't. It never was. And your soul has been trying to tell you this for years. You heard it in the exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. You felt it in the hollow spaces inside relationships that looked fine from the outside. You sensed it in those rare, unguarded moments when you stopped moving long enough to feel the full weight of everything you were carrying, and realized you cannot carry it one step further. There is a stage, call it the Sophia Stage, where the soul stops negotiating with reality, stops bending circumstances back into the shape of its expectations, stops treating every discomfort as a problem to immediately solve rather than a truth to finally hear. You don't reach it by working harder. You reach it by working harder. You reach it by surrendering the war. The question is whether you are brave enough to stop pretending it's not already over. Stop and hear this clearly. Your need to control things is not strength. It is fear dressed in ambition. Every plan you obsessively revised at 2 in the morning. Every conversation you rehearsed before it happened. Every relationship you tried to carefully manage from a safe emotional distance. Every outcome you stayed up engineering, calculating, and recalculating. That was not you being responsible. That was not you being prepared. That was you being terrified of what happens when you stop running the show. That was you choosing the exhausting illusion of control over the devastating vulnerability of trust. And here is what makes it so insidious. It worked, at least on the surface. You built a life that looked composed, functional, even impressive to people watching from the outside. You became extraordinarily skilled at managing appearances, maintaining structure, and keeping the machinery of your existence moving forward. People around you probably admired it. Some of them probably called it discipline, called it drive, called it ambition. What they didn't see, what you barely let yourself see, was the cost. Here's the first shocking truth. The version of you that has been fighting to survive is not the highest version of you. It is a survival mechanism, a necessary one, built in response to real pain, real uncertainty, real moments where control was the only thing standing between you and complete collapse. You needed it then. It served you then. But you never got the memo that the emergency was over. So you kept living in crisis mode long after the crisis had passed, hypervigilant, guarded, and completely cut off from the kind of open, undefended living that actually feels like something. You built walls to protect yourself from pain. Then you moved into those walls and called it a personality. Here's the second truth, and this one is harder. You became so focused on controlling the surface of your life that you lost the current underneath it. Life was moving, expanding, trying to pull you towards something you could not have planned for, could not have predicted, and could not have manufactured through sheer force of will. And every time it tried, every time a door opened that didn't fit your existing blueprint, you redirected, rationalized, chose the known over the unknown because the unknown didn't come with guarantees. But nothing real ever does. Every relationship worth having required you to risk being destroyed by it. Every purpose worth living required you to step somewhere you could not yet see. Every version of your self-worth becoming existed on the other side of a leap your controlling mind would never sanction. You keep waiting for certainty before you move. Certainty is not coming. It was never part of the deal. And here is the third truth, the one that should stop you cold. Safe isn't the destination. Safe is the cage. And you built it yourself, bar by bar, choice by careful choice. The door has been open for longer than you know. Sophia is not a feeling. It is not a spiritual reward handed out to the devoted. It is not something you stumble into after enough yoga classes, enough journaling, enough carefully curated moments of mindfulness that you perform more than you actually inhabit. It is not the prize waiting at the end of your self-improvement project. And it is absolutely not something you can manufacture by trying harder to seem at peace while everything inside you is still screaming. Sophia is what remains when everything false has been burned away. And that burning, understand this clearly, is not comfortable. It is not aesthetic. It does not look like a serene woman sitting beside still water with her eyes closed and her hands open. It looks like the moment you can no longer defend the story you've been telling about yourself. It looks like the night everything you built your identity around stops being enough. It feels like loss before it feels like liberation. It feels like annihilation before it feels like arrival. Most people mistake that burning for failure. They run from it. They rebuild the old structures faster, louder, more desperately. More achievements, more distractions, more noise, anything to avoid sitting inside the discomfort of not knowing who they are without the roles they've been playing. But the ones who stay in that fire, the ones who resist the urge to escape it, discover something the others never do, that what burns away was never actually them. It was the performance, the persona, the carefully assembled collection of masks that were built to make the world comfortable and keep the self protected. Sophia is what you find underneath all of that. It is a state of seeing clearly, not seeing what you want to see, not seeing what confirms your existing beliefs or soothes your existing wounds, seeing what is actually there in your life, in your patterns, in the quiet devastation of your own avoidance, without flinching, without justifying, without immediately rushing to make it mean something more tolerable than it does. And clear sight is devastating before it is freeing. That is not a poetic exaggeration. That is a precise description of the sequence. You will see things about yourself that you have spent enormous energy not seeing. You will recognize choices you made from fear and called wisdom. You will understand relationships you stayed in from need and called love. You will look at the architecture of your life and see, with terrible clarity, how much of it was built around what you were running from, rather than what you were running toward. This is not punishment. This is precision. Because here's what the Sophia Stage demands of you, and what makes it categorically different from every other stage of growth you have moved through. It does not ask you to become more. It asks you to become accurate, to stop pouring your irreplaceable life force into directions that were never aligned with your soul, simply because they were familiar, simply because they were expected, simply because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. Your intellect is extraordinary. Your capacity to analyze, to strategize, to construct meaning from chaos. These are real gifts, but they were never designed to carry the entire weight of your existence. The mind is a magnificent instrument. It is not the conductor. And for most of your life, you have let it run the orchestra, silencing every instrument that didn't fit the score it already had written. The Sophia Stage does not destroy your mind. It restores it to its rightful place. And in doing so, it restores you, not to who you were before the wounds, not to some idealized version of yourself that never actually existed, but to who you have always been underneath the survival, underneath the strategy, underneath the relentless, exhausting effort to manage a life that was always meant to be lived. That is not a small thing. That is everything. You want to know what not letting go has actually cost you. Not in abstract terms. Not in the comfortable, distant language of self-help that lets you nod along without really feeling the weight of it. In real terms. In the currency of your one irreplaceable, non-refundable life. Because this is the conversation most people never have with themselves honestly. They acknowledge in a general sense that holding on is probably not serving them. They agree in theory that letting go would probably be healthier. They collect the insight like a decorative object, something to display in conversation, something to feel intelligent about. And then they walk straight back into the same patterns, the same resistance, the same quiet devastation of a life half lived. So let's be precise about what this has actually taken from you. It has cost you your presence. Not occasionally, chronically. You have been physically inside your life, while being mentally imprisoned somewhere else entirely, locked inside a future that hasn't happened yet, catastrophizing outcomes that may never arrive, or anchored to a past that cannot be changed no matter how many times you return to it and rearrange the details. You have sat across from people who loved you and not fully been there. You have moved through entire seasons, seasons of genuine beauty, unexpected grace, unrepeatable moments, while your mind was somewhere else, running its calculations, managing its fears, solving its imaginary emergencies. Those moments do not come back. That time is gone, and the tragedy is not that life didn't give you enough to be present for. The tragedy is that it gave you everything, and you were too busy holding on to receive it. It has cost you your relationships. The people who tried to love you without conditions ran directly into the conditions you never announced, but always enforced. The ones who tried to get close enough to actually know you encountered walls you'd forgotten you'd built. And instead of examining those walls, instead of asking what they were protecting and whether that protection was still necessary, you studied the people who couldn't scale them and found them lacking. You called it standards. You called it discernment. But if you are honest, and the Sophia Stage demands that you finally are, some of it was architecture. Deliberate distance, engineered just carefully enough that no one could ever get close enough to disappoint you the way someone once did. You did not protect yourself from pain. You protected yourself from depth. And depth was the only thing that was ever going to make any of it feel real. It has cost you your energy. Think about the sheer volume of life force you have directed toward things that were never yours to carry, other people's opinions of you, outcomes you had already done everything possible to influence, wounds from people who are no longer even present in your life, consuming your attention as though they are still in the room, resentments you have maintained with such loyalty and precision that they have become load-bearing walls in the structure of your identity, so embedded that you no longer remember who you are without them. That energy was not infinite. You spent it, and somewhere in the spending, you looked up and realized you were tired in a way that had nothing to do with how much you slept. Tired in your bones, tired in your spirit, the kind of tired that comes not from doing too much, but from doing the wrong things for too long without stopping to ask why. And then, the cost that sits beneath all the others, the one that is hardest to say, out loud and hardest to hear. It has cost you yourself. Not a metaphorical self, your actual self. The version of you that exists beyond the survival strategies, beyond the carefully constructed public face, beyond the roles you have been performing so consistently that you start to believe the performance was the person. That version of you, alive, unguarded, fully present, moving through the world in genuine alignment with what your soul actually values. That person has been waiting, patiently at first, then urgently, then with a kind of grief that you have been misidentifying as emptiness, as restlessness, as vague dissatisfaction with a life that looks fine on paper but feels like it belongs to someone else. Here is the truth that should stop you completely. You are not afraid of failure. You have survived failure. You know how to survive failure. You have built entire systems around surviving it. You are afraid of who you become when you stop needing to control the outcome. Because that person does not need the things you have been using to keep yourself numb and occupied and safely distracted from the rawness of actually being alive. That person does not need the constant motion, the endless optimizing, the compulsive doing that keeps the silence and everything living inside the silence at a manageable distance. That person is free, genuinely, uncomplicatedly, terrifyingly free. And freedom, for someone who has built their entire identity, unmanaging and surviving, and holding the structure together through sheer force of will. Freedom is not immediately recognizable as a gift. It feels like falling. But here is what they don't tell you about falling. When you have finally, completely let go of everything you were clinging to just to stay in place, you don't fall down. You fall open. And that is where your real life has been waiting all along. So here's what you do now, not tomorrow. Now, release your grip on one thing, one narrative, one resentment, one version of the future you've been demanding life deliver. Open your hand and let it fall. Then do it again tomorrow. You've been loyal to your pain for years, defended it, built your identity around it. That ends today. Honor your freedom with the same ferocity you gave your suffering. The life waiting on the other side of letting go is not a possibility. It's already yours. You're just still blocking the door.